There is nothing worse than making a photography or videography purchasing decision, and you buy the gear, you get it sent to you, unwrap it, open it up, start putting it to use that one time, and then immediately after that one time realizing that you don't need this. There's nothing worse than buyer's remorse, spending your hard-earned money or money that is going to be charged to a credit card that is in theory not even real. There's nothing worse than building up that debt for something that you don't find any use for. So today I want to talk to you about the 3 items, categories, things that are completely unnecessary or just completely useless for 99% of photographers and even some videographers that you should absolutely stay away from. We're going to jump right into it with number 1. Stop the lens redundancies. Listen, I get it. A lot of people will say, well, I have this lens that's fast and this lens that's smaller or more compact. Which one do you use more? And let's make a decision. And honestly, you have to start to think about how often do you shoot things at a certain aperture for low light capabilities or for depth of field? And could there be something that fills that out more? One great example of this is I have people ask me quite a bit about purchasing a 35mm or a 33mm 1.4 from Fujifilm after they already have the 35mm f2. And I always have to ask, well, how many cameras do you have? Sometimes people will say just one. Well, you can only have one lens on at a time. Are you going to carry 2 of the same focal length? Why would you waste that space instead of carrying an alternative? And the people that have 2 focal lengths, I always have to remind them, would you ever in any way, shape, or form at any time in your life want 2 of the same focal lengths on 2 different bodies? What's the point? We always think that by having a lens that is very niche for this thing and niche for this thing, and it's my favorite focal length or field of view, that now I'll be able to accomplish every single thing that comes under the sun and every single situation that I'm up against. But it's not true. 99% of the time I see people selling off one or the other because this is too big or this is too slow. When it comes to purchasing lenses, I always recommend purchase something that is very different from a focal length that you use all the time. But if you're someone who has a 35mm f2 lens and you're looking for something that's faster in case you want to shoot portraits, don't get a duplicate of a 35 1.4 or whatever. Get yourself something like a 50mm that is faster or a 75mm that is faster. Even a 75 f2 will give you a lot better depth of field whenever it comes to that background blur that everyone lusts over than a 35mm f2. Now you have 2 different focal lengths, and if you have 2 cameras, you can put one on each. For more than anything, the effect you're going for is going to be greater because you decided to go for the longer focal length. It's just a bad decision to spend extra money on a focal length that's a redundancy that is only going to be in niche use situations and isn't going to give you really anything that much different than a stop of light. Unnecessary gear item number 2, your B cam. You probably don't need that extra body. Let's be honest. I talk to people all the time that are thinking about getting a second body because they shoot this or that and they think maybe I'll need a second frame to be able to cover some things up. They're shooting YouTube, they're shooting all these different things. What if I'm doing this assignment or this gig or I want to do this and that? And unfortunately, a lot of it isn't based in an actual need that they have. And one thing that I really don't like is when gear just sits on a shelf and it isn't used. And unfortunately for a lot of people, that second camera is going to become the gear that isn't used. We have this weird thing in our minds right now because of stuff we see on the internet that for you to truly be someone who is in production, doing well in photography and videography, you have to have all the gear all at once to be able to fulfill everything that might come your way. Oh, you know what? You only have an XH2S. Well, what happens if someone comes and asks you to shoot a Netflix approved film tomorrow and they say, I need a B shot. I won't have a camera on me. What am I going to do? Well, that's absolutely not going to happen. With the work that you're doing right now and the things that you've spec'd, the things that you discuss, and the work that has gotten you to where you are in your portfolio, whether it's for photo or for video, if it's going to make your life easier, that's great. But if it's unnecessary to do your job any better, you have to take that into account. A lot of people think that the justification for a purchase should just be the ease of use or ease of life or making my job easier. But a lot of times, just because something's a little bit easier, it doesn't mean that your return on investment is going to benefit you. I know a lot of people that think, okay, once I pay off gear, now that's done. That's not on my books. That's not really on debt or anything. But if that gear is just sitting there and not making you money, it doesn't help out. If you're going to a portrait shoot and you know you're going to be shooting a 90mm or an 85mm or a 135mm lens the whole time, you're not going to have to change anything, then what's the second camera body going to do? If you have time to change lenses, what's the second camera body going to do other than make you look like you're more professional? Even whenever it comes to videography, a lot of the work that I do with talking head is all that I need. I know I'm going to lay over B-roll. I know I can make a little bit of a cut because I export most of my work in 1080 for clientele. And I know that the 4K and the 6K on the cameras that I use is going to be more than enough to get the job done. I don't necessarily always need a B cam, but if I do, I know where I can rent one. Borrowlenses.com, lensrentals.com. I rent locally at the Camera Exchange whenever I need something immediately. Knowing where you can get stuff from, and a lot of these places have a quick 1 to 2 day turnaround, is exactly what you need to be a better production artist, to be better whenever it comes to videography, for photography, but you should know that ahead of time. But purchasing stuff outright, like long glass that you're going to use only once in a while, or a second body that's only going to be used on one use whenever it comes to one job, isn't necessary because it's not going to make you more money. And we have this fallacy in our head that, well, I can use it for this and it can be a travel cam. Just don't do it. There's no need to buy it. Save yourself some money. You don't need the second camera. When you need it, you'll know. And until then, rent and add that into your quotes whenever you're quoting people. Item number 3, diffusion filters. Cine Blue, Tiffin Black Pro Mist, anything like that. Let's start to give them a rest if you don't already have them. And if you do have them, continue to use them as you need to, but just know that you're not going to be missing out if you're not using them. The creative industry has gone crazy in spending money on these diffusion filters, which I think bring in a good look, kind of cool and stuff, but it's not necessary to everything you're doing. And a lot of times because of the way that we sell lenses, gear, we swap things in and out. Two things are just super duper annoying. Having to buy a diffusion filter for every lens that you have because it may have a different filter thread size. And number 2, having to use step-up rings if you buy just one giant ass diffusion filter because you want to be able to use it on everything. It never looks that great. It's always cumbersome. It's always annoying. And if you're someone like me who likes a lens hood, it just doesn't go with the way that you flow. I get the reason for these things. I think they're really good in certain applications. If a lens is way too sharp for video, I do have some drop-in filters that I can use on any of these sharp-ass lenses that I have, but it's not something that I feel like is a look that needs to be baked. And more importantly, there are different things that you can buy, like Behance or different plugins for Final Cut Pro, Premiere Pro, and DaVinci Resolve, and even LumaFusion if you edit on a tablet or on a cell phone, that give the exact same effect and actually give you more control over certain areas and certain things that are happening. You see, we try to replicate a look that came from early cinema glass, like any kind of the early Cook glass. I think of the Speed Pancro 2 that was just remade by Light Lens Lab. Actually, we try to duplicate and replicate things like that. But the only issue is that whenever we try to replicate and duplicate that, what they filter on our lens, it's replicated across the whole scene. And that's not the way that things really rendered whenever it came to these original videos. So we're not even getting a 1-to-1 look. You want halation in your images. There's many different ways you can do. I actually know a Photoshop hack taught to me by Kyle McDougall. He has a tutorial on it on YouTube to where you can add halation after the fact. You don't need to have any other plugins. You just need to have Photoshop and Lightroom and about 5 minutes to make it work. And it does a great job. Looks very much like film whenever the remjet layer is removed. But I digress. The whole thing though is we are looking to make this certain look on our images for film, for video, and want to make it look like it's something nostalgic and beautiful. And there's just better tools for that. With one time buying a plugin or 20 minutes learning a certain craft, you can make the look the way you want to that looks authentic in your images for video and for photo instead of spending $60, $70, $80, sometimes up to $119, depending on the filter thread size and the effect strength that you're getting from these Tiffin Black Pro Mist and the Cine Blooms that again aren't even one-to-one replicas. Just because something muddies the image doesn't necessarily mean that the image is muddied in a professional or well-done way that is going to make your image look like something that a professional or a vintage, cinema glass is going to give you. Editor D here, because I know a lot of people are going to get mad at me whenever they're talking about diffusion filters, because they're going to bring up, what about smoke? What about this? What about that? Listen, I'm not saying to not use them. Again, as I said in the video, I sometimes do use them to get a certain look. Mostly whenever I want things to be very hazy, I do own smoke filters. I do own Black Pro Mist filters. But the thing that I'm saying is to constantly purchase that over and over and over again. It's not necessary to get the look that you want. Again, Like I mentioned, Kyle McDougall in his video, he talks about Maston Labs, the archetype process, aka TAP, for stills photos. Whenever it comes to video, buying D-Hands, using DaVinci Resolve, these things can get you that look. And also, a lot of the earlier lenses, they're manual focus lenses, or a lot of lenses from SLR Magic primarily, as well as lenses from places like Sirui. They do have lenses that have weird quirks to them. They have the ghosting and veiling that you want to have for things to look nostalgic. They have the aberrations for things to look nostalgic in your video. But whenever it comes to photo, I just really want everyone to understand that you don't need a Black Pro Mist to make your images look dreamy. I mean, honestly, you can achieve that so many different ways. Buying these third-party lenses, Fujifilm even makes a first-party lens, a 35 1.4, that gives a similar look without a black. I think a Black Pro Mist is overkill on that lens. Whenever it comes to Leica, buying earlier Leica lenses, lenses from Light Lens Lab, lenses from MS Optics. These are great things you can get. Vintage classic lenses from Canon, from Leica, from Nikon, they are available. And that's what I would spend my money on. I wouldn't spend my money on, if I want a certain look, on more Black Pro Mist, so we can just sit on this one lens that you're probably going to upgrade and change because that's what gas does. I would take a low risk, high reward chance on a lens that is probably going to say it has fungus. It's probably going to say it has moisture in there, but it doesn't affect the image. And it probably will affect the image, but isn't that kind of what you're doing with your Black Pro Mist and stuff anyway? Those are the 3 things that I believe that you should just leave behind in 2023 and don't make the purchase for in 2024. Redundancy in lenses. Don't get yourself a second camera body, and you don't need that diffusion filter. There's way better options out there. So with all that being said, I hope you guys enjoyed. Hope you understand where I'm coming from. Take it light, but take it.